The spirit of Rio must embody the full awareness of the fragility of our planet. The spirit of Rio must lead us to think constantly of the future, our children's future.
Rio Centro, a suburb of Rio de Janeiro. The United Nations Conference on Environment and Development is about to begin. Thousands of diplomats, environmentalists, and journalists arrive for the largest UN meeting ever held. The aim is to seek common action to protect the planet. Over 100 heads of state and government will attend. No wonder it's called the Earth Summit. 20 years ago, the UN Conference on Human Environment held in Stockholm firmly placed the preservation of the planet on the world agenda. In Rio, environment is linked irrevocably to development. Maurice Strong, who organized the 1972 conference, once again accepts the challenge. Celebrities like Brazilian soccer star Pelé helped draw the world's attention.
Well, I could wear a shirt like you, Pelé, but I cannot play football like you.
But we are in the same team here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no problem.
The Earth team.
Finally, after 2 years of worldwide preparations, June 3rd, 1992, the official opening. A few miles away, in Rio's Guanabara Bay, another gathering, an unofficial one. The Viking ship Gaia sails here from Scandinavia, bringing 10,000 messages from children of many nations. The messages are added to the wishes of thousands of other children. Here in the Global Forum, non-governmental organizations and environmental action groups hold their own Earth Summit under the symbolic tree of life to monitor the work of the official conference.
Distinguished delegates have said that this is an historical moment. However, it will only be so if the Rio Conference also marks a new beginning for the United Nations system, for action by states, and for the mobilization of all peoples of the world.
We have been the most successful species ever. We are now a species out of control. Our very success is leading us to the dangerous future that has brought us here.
Much of the preparatory work for the Earth Summit is based on a landmark UN document, the Brundtland Report, named after Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland of Norway. Her theme is the need for human development which preserves the environment.
Time is short for us to rectify the present unsustainable patterns of human development. We must eradicate poverty. We must achieve greater equality within and between nations. We must reconcile human activities and human numbers with the laws of nature. We will all be held accountable for what we failed to agree in Rio. For the first time in human history, all over the world, people will be able to closely monitor their leaders at work at a major conference through widespread television and other media coverage.
The eyes and ears of the world are on the Earth Summit as it gets underway. Some 3,000 journalists are expected, but over 9,000 media people are eventually accredited.
I don't know. I don't know.
Jacques Cousteau is one of the many crusaders who
May I have
attend.
your attention? The next press briefing will be at 2 o'clock. The Minister of the Environment of Germany. I repeat, the next press briefing will be at 2 o'clock.
For the media, it's the biggest environmental story ever.
Suggest perhaps that the person who has the copies of the treaty go right down to this.
This is the first time ever in history that we've had a meeting of the leaders of all the nations of the earth and gathered to take decisions that will literally determine the future of the earth if we don't do it here and if we don't allow our common interests to override all these differences and short-term and narrow self-interest issues. When are we going to do it? And will there be time?
Action to save the planet is contained in 3 documents brought to Rio for final negotiation. The first is the Rio Declaration, a statement of principles to guide the relationship between human behavior and the planet. And secondly, Agenda 21, an action plan to redirect economies to sustain the environment into the 21st century and beyond. All areas are covered, from preventing the spread of deserts to reducing poverty. From managing waste to changing patterns of production and consumption. And thirdly, a statement of forest principles, which balances the right to use forests with the need to protect them. Also at the Earth Summit, 2 legally binding conventions recently negotiated by the United Nations are open for signing. The Framework Convention on Climate Change, which seeks to reduce emissions of the greenhouse gases that warm the planet and threaten to raise sea levels, and a Biodiversity Convention, requiring inventories of all living species on the planet and calling for their protection.
These are very fundamental changes that we're talking about. They do not come easily. They particularly do not come easily when they have to be negotiated with 178 nations, and many of those nations experiencing very difficult here and now economic and other pressures.
The main committee reconciles the differences separating the richer from the poor nations. Chairman Ambassador Tommy Koh from Singapore guides meetings well into the night, but there are many stumbling blocks. Among them, how to transfer technology from industrialized countries, and the developing countries' need for financial help to implement Agenda 21.
The matter of financial resources will be the cornerstone of Agenda 21. For the developing countries, the attainment of a reasonably high standard of living is a target that cannot be compromised.
We cannot save the environment if the rich refuse to provide greater aid to the poor and are also reluctant to improve the terms of trade.
Africa's external debt is the single most important factor inhibiting our developmental efforts.
The bulk of developing countries' incremental investment needs for environmental purposes must come from savings that they can achieve through improved economic policies, from private sector sources, and from improved trade. But good economic policies and greater trade alone are not enough. Substantially increased aid flows are crucial if the low-income countries are to meet their national environmental needs. We have proposed an Earth increment for IDA, the bank's concessional lending arm, to help the poorest countries meet their environmental objectives.
The need for women to play a central role in sustainable development is strongly felt at the Global Forum and the Earth Summit.
We must propose new efforts to improve education and literacy, especially among women, in order to empower women to make decisions about their future, about their lives, and about their families.
Increasing options for women is the key to sustainable development for everyone. Their full participation in society is essential, for example, if population increase is to be contained.
Equity will only be achieved when women in developing countries and their counterparts in the North have the same access to family planning services.
What the Church opposes is the imposition of demographic policies and the promotion of methods for limiting births which are contrary to the objective moral order.
Below the outstretched arms of the monumental Christ the Redeemer on Rio's world-famous Corcovado, leaders of the world's major religions join hands in prayer for the Earth and for the success of the Earth Summit.
We can do anything which we want. We can control the whole planet. I think this is a wrong conception. After all, we are a part of the nature. So if you see nature, you see balance, you see dramatically you see change, I think entire humanity will suffer.
Peace and harmony, however, are not always evident at Rio Centro. Some groups are angered by the unwillingness of the United States to sign the Biodiversity Convention, which aims at preserving all life forms.
We're simply discussing the fact that everyone in the United States, particularly youth in the United States, are not happy with the policies of the administration today.
Back up, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt.
The U.S. believes the convention insufficiently protects owners of patents. It's also concerned about how technology transfer to developing countries is to be financed.
We would have hoped that the negotiations leading up to the Biodiversity Convention would have confined themselves to issues of protecting flora and fauna. If they had done that, we would have enthusiastically signed this convention. They did not do that. They addressed issues of patents and intellectual property rights.
This convention is for the conservation and protection of our biological diversity and not for the protection of intellectual property rights. We concur that intellectual property rights are a constraint to technology transfer, and the purpose of the convention is to deal with it as such.
The transfer of environmentally sound technology will promote the harnessing of the enormous biodiversity of the South to the mutual advantage of both the developed and the developing countries.
Indigenous people from all over the world come to Rio to emphasize that their traditional ways of life support and sustain the planet. They hold a conference in Carioca village, outside of Rio, to assert their rights. For them and for many others, a major concern is the future of forests.
Just 2 days ago, President Bush announced an ambitious initiative to fund forest conservation in developing countries. This initiative aims at no less than doubling assistance to developing countries for forest conservation and sustainable use.
The leaders of indigenous groups take their case to Rio Centro itself. They call for binding commitments to limit the unsustainable commercial encroachment that is literally destroying the ecosystem they inhabit.
That translates into 51 million trees per day.
Industrialized nations cut down many of their forests long ago. Now they see the world's dwindling timber resources as vital habitats for valuable species and as a carbon sink to absorb greenhouse gases. By contrast, the countries of the South wish to continue using their forest resources for much-needed development.
We wish to underline the supremacy of our sovereignty over our forests. We are certainly not holding them in custody for those who have destroyed their own forests and now try to claim ours as part of the heritage of mankind.
Where words are inadequate, art takes over. The creative contribution of many artists is evident throughout Rio. a French theater company acts out the greatest of all menaces to our planet, war. The streets of Rio and the Global Forum become an ecological world fair. Just about anyone can air their hopes and dreams of saving the planet.
Okay, fine. What we have here is a solar box cooker, and it's designed to cook by using solar energy entirely. It's a way of cutting down on deforestation and using a type of energy that's available to everybody.
Advocacy groups dramatize the issues. Concern about the use of nuclear energy, the dangers of toxic waste disposal, the need for clean and renewable energy sources. Events staged to underline public concern about air pollution and global warming. It is not just the protesters who point to the high levels of oil and coal consumption. It is also an issue among official delegates.
20% of the world population are consuming 80% of its resources and are also responsible for the 75% of the emissions that pollute the atmosphere.
Global warming resulting from proliferation of greenhouse gases may lead to glacial melting, water expansion, and sea level rise, leading to dire consequences for Pacific Islands.
The sea level rise could annihilate the Marshall Islands as effectively as a nuclear bomb.
In an effort to prevent drastic and irreversible changes in global weather patterns, the Convention on Climate Change seeks to reduce levels of the greenhouse gases that contribute to atmospheric warming.
Switzerland wishes to reaffirm its determination announced 2 years ago to stabilize its emissions of CO2 by the year 2000 to the level of 1990 and to reduce its emissions after the year 2000.
Some countries, however, see timetables as unrealistic, with little planning to back them up.
Why are the United States afraid of such a small country to declare its own reduction of carbon dioxide?
We would be delighted to have Switzerland declare it. That's never really been a problem. We hope at the time that Switzerland declares it, it would also be kind enough to tell us precisely how it intends to do it, which is what the Global Climate Change Convention sets up as a process.
There's been reports that the U.S. government has been putting pressure on the governments of Austria, Switzerland, and the Netherlands not to put together an agreement outside of the climate convention that would commit them and perhaps some other European nations to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by the year 2000 at 1990 levels.
No, the United States never puts pressure on anybody. This is clearly a canard. However, we continue to think that the notion of setting targets and timetables really does put the cart before the horse in this exercise, that there is a fundamental need to determine specific and precise actions that people are going to take to improve the quality of air and CO2 emissions.
The Framework Convention is finalized, but it leaves targets and timetables for future negotiation. Some industrialized countries are not ready to support detailed measures, while others push for stricter guidelines. Germany, for example, says an oil tax has a double benefit. It will cut pollution and raise money for cleanups.
25 to 30% reduction in CO2 by the year 2005. We should ensure that this objective is reached by placing taxes and levies on energy and CO2.
Oil exporters, however, oppose the proposed tax.
We in OPEC would urge that no drastic measures be adopted that would penalize oil producers before there is substantive evidence to show that these measures are right and necessary.
With time running out, positions have to be reconciled. Maurice Strong, Conference Secretary General, redoubles his efforts to build diplomatic bridges. New drafts are communicated back to national capitals for guidance and clearance. Amendments are quickly drafted. There are always new documents to be considered. Over 100 million pages are produced for the summit, all on recycled paper to be recycled once again after use in Rio.
Recyclable is garbage that we can use again, such as plastic, cans, papers, and metal. This is recyclable.
And what does this worker think about the Earth Summit?
I think it's okay until now. Lots of people and tourists. Many are worrying about ecology and nature. But they are forgetting the most important, the poor families all over the world, the hungry, the favelas in Rio de Janeiro, the poor people that the government don't take care of.
In the favelas, the squatter areas, and all around the city, security is tight as Rio braces for the arrival of the heads of state and government. The streets are swept clean. Homeless children are moved to camps. Rio de Janeiro presents its most agreeable face. Never before have so many dignitaries collected in one place. Over 100 heads of state and government come to Rio. The leaders provide a vital final boost to the negotiations, and it means they can personally sign the conventions and add their views on the themes of the conference. The convergence of world leaders makes the UN Conference on Environment and Development a true Earth Summit.
Pronunciamento do excelentíssimo senhor Dr. Fidel Castro Ruz.
Let this be the end of selfishness. Let this be the end of hegemony. Let this be the end of callousness, irresponsibility, and deceit.
In the range of issues related to the environment, perhaps the ugliest scar is the abject poverty of over 1 billion inhabitants of our planet.
I did not come here to apologize. We come to Rio prepared to continue America's unparalleled efforts to preserve species and habitat. And let me be clear, our efforts to protect biodiversity itself will exceed the requirements of the treaty.
J'ajoute que la France approuve.
France approves the Convention on Climate and the Convention on Biodiversity, even if it would have preferred some bolder commitments. But it is a beginning, and tomorrow I hope it will go further.
Wir bekennen uns deshalb zur Verstärkung.
We commit ourselves, therefore, to an increase in official development aid. As soon as possible, we want to see 0.7% of the gross national product earmarked for official development assistance.
International cooperation should be based on respect for state sovereignty. All countries, large and small, rich and poor, strong and weak, are entitled to participate in international activities relating to environment and development on an equal footing.
If you do not give us money, we are going to cut our forests. Whom are you hurting? Are you hurting the North, or are you hurting yourselves also?
Nous sommes les leaders.
We are the leaders, and therefore we have to assume our responsibilities towards our countrymen, ourselves, and especially towards history.
I don't believe people are going to allow their leaders to forget what they have done here, nor what they have not done fully or adequately. We have got to make sure that the road beyond Rio is a fast track to action, a fast track to implementing what was done here. Rio is not an endpoint.
Very impressive, very impressive.
2 legally binding conventions are signed. The landmark climate treaty commits nations to reducing harmful emissions as soon as possible, though at the insistence of the United States, it includes no specific targets or timetables. The second historic agreement is the Biodiversity Convention. It aims at conserving the world's dwindling inventory of living species. It requires signatories to share research, profits, and technology with the nations whose genetic resources they use. The United States has yet to sign.
Double signing.
And this unprecedented gathering also leads to the adoption of 3 non-legally binding agreements. The Statement on Forest Principles, recognizing the sovereign rights of countries to utilize their forests while minimizing the damage inflicted. The Rio Declaration, emphasizing the protection of environment in all aspects of economic development. And Agenda 21, a far-reaching blueprint for action to preserve the planet.
All of the attention for the last 3 years has been on the road to Rio. Now we're here at Rio, and we can see that the real attention should be focused on the road from Rio. How can we use the success of the Earth Summit in symbolic and psychological terms to accomplish substantive changes in the policies that are now resulting in so much destruction of the Earth's environment?
The Rio Summit was not just another event. It was not one more conference. It was an exercise in striking a balance between globalism and nationalism. I am particularly pleased to see that the Rio Summit renewed the call for eradication of poverty, because I am convinced that poverty and peace cannot coexist. Au Brésil et à la planète Terre.
As the leaders depart, they take with them much more than agreements, statistics, and facts. There is also the human dimension, exemplified by the appeal of a 12-year-old girl speaking for all generations to come.
I am only a child, yet I know if all the money spent on war was spent on finding environmental answers, ending poverty, and finding treaties, what a wonderful place this earth would be. In my life, I have dreamt of seeing the great herds of wild animals, jungles and rainforests full of birds and butterflies. But now I wonder if they will even exist for my children to see. Well, what you do makes me cry at night. You grown-ups say you love us, but I challenge you, please, make your actions reflect your words.